Welcome, my name's Eddie Pratt, and I'm delighted to introduce Louise May, who's going to talk all about strategy today in the webinar. I hope you enjoy it. Over to you, Louise.
Thanks, Eddie. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on product strategy. I'm Louise May. I'm Director of Product Management at Product Focus, and thank you for joining me today. Let's have a quick look at your screens. If you need a better view of the slides during the webinar, you can maximise the slide window and hide the question panel. If you want a closer look at the slides later, you can download them through the handouts option in the live storm panel. And we'll be taking questions at the end. However, feel free to pop your questions in the Q&A box as we go. Eddie will answer questions during the webinar, and then he'll pick a few at the end for me to answer. And finally, we'll send you a link to the webinar recording afterwards. So, strategy. Of all the product concerns that we hear about and help companies with, strategy is a really common recurring theme. So today, I just want to share some of what I've learned over the years. And what I have learned is that I don't think we're that bad at creating a decent product strategy. Where we fail is on executing that strategy, because there are so many things outside our control and outside our influence that can derail us. And I'm going to cover some practical things that you can start immediately, such as following a structured framework that'll give you more control and more influence, applying some stakeholder management principles to help prevent derailment, and negotiating trade-offs. There are loads of strategy frameworks out there, but my favourite comes from a book called Playing to Win by Lafley and Martin. And I'm going to use this framework as the basis for the webinar. Lafley and Martin propose that strategy consists of 5 conscious choices. And I think the word choice is really important. I think you'll see as we go through how important that word choice is. And choice number 1, what's our winning aspiration? Choice number 2, where will we play? Choice number 3, how will we win? Choice number 4, what capabilities must be in place? Choice number 5, what management systems are required? So on the surface, we've got 5 fairly easy questions there, but there are definitely no easy answers, as we'll see as we work through this. Just to set the scene a bit, I'll give you a quick overview of the book, and it's a longitudinal case study. It's at Procter & Gamble between the years 2000 and 2009. And Procter & Gamble is a huge global consumer packaged goods company. So they've got lots of high volume, low margin products on a fast purchase cycle. It operates in personal care with brands like Gillette and Pantene, and it operates in home care with brands like Ariel and Fairy, and then also in health and hygiene with brands like Oral-B. It competes with other large CPG companies like Nestle and Colgate-Palmolive, and most of the time there's several local brands that compete in each region with them. So at this point you might be thinking, how is this relevant to me? So I'll address that question right away. It is a case study on company strategy rather than product strategy. The products are FMCG rather than the range that we have in the audience today, and the era, 2009, is very different from today. But none of this matters, because the principles, the framework, the actions, they've all stood the test of time, and they apply to all businesses, all portfolios, and all products. So bear with me, work through it with me, and adapt the examples and learning points to your own situation as we go. Right, let's dive straight in. Choice number 1, what's our winning aspiration? Now, this is our bold goal. It raises the bar on target setting. And as we're just at the end of the Winter Olympics, we've got some sporting pictures on the slides for you. But let's all take a moment right now just to think about our own bold goals. What is our winning aspiration? Right, you've had a moment to think about it. and I've got some questions for you. Is your winning aspiration bold, ambitious, and clear? Have you articulated it and documented it clearly and concisely as a measurable outcome? Have you shared it with all the teams you work with on your product? Have you shared it with your senior stakeholders? If the answer is yes to all those questions, then brilliant. You've got a strong foundation for your product strategy. If the answer is no to any of those questions, then you've got some urgent work to do after this webinar, because this is a really important starting point. This is the foundation of the rest of your strategy. And the next 4 choices cascade from here. Procter & Gamble's winning aspiration is to be the industry leader in every category and market where it chooses to compete. And specifically, it wants to be first or second in market share with leading profitability. And there's 3 really important points to take from the Procter & Gamble winning aspiration. Number 1, it's competitive and it's challenging, because winning means beating somebody, not just making small, inconsequential improvements to keep up. Number 2, it forces exits. If a brand can't realistically be number 1 or number 2, Procter & Gamble, they'll either fix it, sell it, or shut it down. So this is really clear, precise, ruthless portfolio pruning. And the third one is that it cascades. It's a corporate aspiration and it shapes the next 4 questions in the framework. Now, of course, that term winning really depends on the situation you're in. Not everybody can be first or second. Smaller businesses have got to adapt their winning aspirations, but it should still be competitive and challenging. Moving on to choice 2. I said we had lots of Winter Olympics pictures for you. And I'm going skiing next week, on holiday next week. Yay! So moving on to choice number 2. Where will we play? What are the edges of our playing field? Or in product management language, in which markets, segments, and contexts will we compete? Now, here's an extract from the book. The choice of where to play defines the playing field. It's a question of what business you're really in. It's a choice about where to compete and where not to compete. And understanding that choice is crucial, because the playing field you choose is also the place where you'll need to find ways to win. Procter & Gamble used Olay, a women's face moisturiser, to show that where to play meant choosing a very specific and much narrower segment, a much narrower price point, and a much narrower distribution channel, and then having the courage to exclude everyone else. Now, I'm going to repeat the second half of that sentence. Having the courage to exclude everyone else. Because a common mistake is failing to choose, because trying to be all things to all people just results in underserving everyone. It can be really tempting to accept the status quo rather than rock the boat, but sometimes it's necessary. And with Olay, Procter & Gamble narrowed the field to a much smaller target market in order to win. One issue often quoted is that the company strategy changes every time a new MD comes in, and that has an impact on product strategy. And then when the MD changes every couple of years, people get tired of constantly flip-flopping. And then you think, well, what's the point in having a product strategy? I think, well, firstly, if the MD is changing every few years, there's probably bigger issues in the business, but we'll put that one aside. It is a valid point. But I would say that it's not a good reason not to bother with a product strategy, because a strong strategy that you can underpin by facts, figures, and evidence should really be able to withstand a leadership change. So we've set the winning aspiration, we've chosen our playing field. On to the third choice. How will we win? What's our unique advantage in our chosen space? Now, in the book, Pampers, so babies' nappies, is used as the example. And they demonstrated that how to win is not about being better at everything. It's about choosing 1 or 2 dimensions that matter most to the customers in your playing field. And then you organise the whole system around it. And Pampers decided they were going to win on two things: superior dryness for baby comfort and backed by science and clinical credibility. And they did win because they chose the dimensions that mattered most to parents in that playing field. So let's have a look at how this example transfers to some of our products. So particularly in business to business environments, which a lot of us work in. Well, it still holds true. We still need to understand the market. We still need to build what matters most. We still need to understand the unique value that we bring. And we still need to position ourselves against the competition. And this discipline is really helpful for sales teams, business to business sales teams and marketing teams, because we get much stronger marketing messages and much better qualified leads if we bring this level of clarity. It gives stronger, more confident sales narratives. It gives better discipline on value selling and not over discounting. And complex deals have a lot more competitive clarity. And very importantly, I think you'll all smile at this one, sales know what not to sell. They can stay within the lines of the playing field and they can target the customers who are most likely to buy. And overall, we just get a much stronger alignment between product, marketing and sales teams, which is always a good thing. Now, on to choice 4. What capabilities must be in place? What do we have to be really good at? I said earlier that we're not bad at strategy, we're bad at executing. And so the next 2 questions are really important because I really do believe that this is where most of us fail. And this is through no fault of our own, because this is where, as a product manager, we lose control and we can only influence at best. And one of Procter & Gamble's core capabilities is deep consumer understanding. And they argue that its ability to deeply understand consumers, so consumer needs, habits, emotional drivers, is a strategic capability. And they invest heavily in that. And that investment is key. There's loads of examples in the book of considered choices where they've invested significant amounts of time and money in consumer research. But the best example, I think, in the book is where they've made a decision to take razor blades for men into the Indian mass market. There was a large, relatively untapped market just waiting for the right product. And for Gillette, the challenge was it's a different price and a different cost pressure to the markets that they normally operated in. And they could have taken the easy option. They could have just stripped out all the existing features right down to the bare minimum and dropped the price. But they didn't. They sent their R&D engineer out to India to experience what shaving was like in India with real Indian facilities in 2000. So what was it like to shave without the luxury of shaving foam? When water's precious and you're limited to a small cup of cold water, well, it turns out it's really very different. So instead of simply stripping out features and offering a cheap, substandard product, they designed a whole new razor with a more simple design, a single blade that didn't clog, and something that was affordable for Indian consumers, but still profitable for Procter & Gamble. Now, without this investment in the core capability, a poor design could have completely undermined the proposition and could have lost them the Indian market. There's lots of other examples of where companies have really invested in core capabilities. Let's go Amazon. They've invested in capabilities of world-class logistics and operational data. And this means that they can win with convenience, speed, reliability at a massive scale. Zara, clothing company, ultra-fast design to store supply chain. Ryanair has got extreme cost discipline, and that is embedded in every decision they make. And Toyota is synonymous with continuous improvement. So understanding what core capabilities are needed and then investing in them is really vital, and it's often quite neglected. And our final choice in our strategy: what management systems are required? What internal systems and processes sustain our strategy? And this is a really important question. And again, in my experience, this is the hidden component that undermines otherwise strong strategies. I've worked with many organisations where the first 3 choices are executed well, but the final 2 are not, because incorrect management systems, they persistently reward the wrong decisions and the wrong behaviours. So what is a management system? I'll read you a definition of a management system. A management system is the set of structures, processes, rules, metrics, behaviours and tools an organisation uses to plan, make decisions, execute work, monitor performance and improve over time. So it's not software, it's not policies, it's the operating system of the organisation, and it's how the organisation runs day to day and how it stays under control as it grows. Strong management systems make success measurable, and importantly, they make success repeatable. A weak management system means that success is accidental, it's fragile, it's personality dependent. So instead of the organisation producing results, it gets lucky, or it relies on a few heroic individuals, which make growth almost impossible. So how do you know if your organisation has got weak management systems? Decisions tend to be opinion driven, not data driven, leading to strategy changes every few months and constant reprioritisation. Performance is hard to measure, so everyone's busy but progress is slow. Success depends on individuals, not systems, and this creates a bit of a hero culture. It can get quite political, and burnout is really common. Problems are repeated over and over again, so instead of getting solved, they keep making the same mistakes every year, the same internal conflicts, the same customer complaints. So I'm not going to go on, you get the picture. But sadly, this is really common, and I'm sure lots of you listening will recognise all of this. Procter & Gamble understood this, and they invested heavily in improving management systems as part of the change programme. On a people level, they put their top talent in their priority businesses. And then they aligned their reward system and incentives with the winning aspirations. On a process level, they created learning and feedback loops so that fast learning and insight was fed directly into the strategy refinement. On a governance level, they brought clarity on brand versus category versus corporate decisions, and that came with a clear RACI to avoid ambiguous decision rights, meaning that clear accountability and faster decisions were made at the right level. From a performance perspective, metrics and dashboards gave a ruthless focus on the 5 choices. There were a few other strategically meaningful measures, but no unnecessary noise that often comes with busy dashboards. And with these clear performance metrics, they invested in strategic priorities and they divested non-winning businesses to keep that sharp focus. This playing to win model lends itself well to a one-page strategy document, and you can use this as a standalone communication tool, as a constant reminder of what your strategy is, or it's the exec summary in a full strategy document. And now this is my interpretation. This is not the Procter & Gamble version. This is just my interpretation of what the Pampers strategy summary would have looked like. And you can see it's high level. It shows only the really big impact items, but at the same time, it gives quite a lot of information. So we can see the winning aspiration is set at company level, which is to be the industry leader. The playing field was in affluent geographies where parents valued comfort and quality over price. They were going to win on superior dryness, maximising baby comfort, backed by science, clinical credibility. And these first 3 choices set the final 2. And their unique capabilities had to include superior chemistry skills, R&D skills, superior facilities, and externally accredited testing facilities, combined with that deep consumer understanding. And then their management systems had to be exceptionally good at manufacturing, distributing products at scale. with an excellent network of distribution channel partners. So after this webinar, a good starting point for you would be to pick up this template. It's in the handouts, and just see how much you can complete. And any gaps in there will show you where you need to do some more work. Now, before we go on, I do want to spend a bit more time on choices 4 and 5, because these are the areas that we struggle with. We struggle with them professionally. If you're in a difficult situation, you could be struggling with them personally, and they are so difficult that quite often we can struggle with these emotionally as well, because when choices 4 and 5 are weak, it has a really big impact on how we do our jobs. We've just seen the perfect world, or the perfect view of the world, with the Procter & Gamble case study. But what happens in other organisations and what happens in real life? So just to reiterate, here are some of the signs of a weak core capabilities and weak management systems. If your roadmap is driven by the loudest stakeholder, that's not a great place to be. No prioritisation framework, strategy not linked to delivery, too many projects, just too much to do, too little time, too much making busy, no outcome metrics, constant context switching, and then repeated heroic firefighting by some key individuals. And leadership teams will often think that the problem lies in the product organisation, but often it's the opposite. It's the lack of investment in the core capabilities or the management systems by the leadership team that is actually undermining the product organisation. So I'm going to go off-piste a bit here, because if we do work in one of these chaotic environments that I've just described, it can be quite tough. So let's reflect on the reality of those 5 choices in Playing to Win. This is Stephen Covey's circle of control model, and it's often used in counselling situations, but it does lend itself really well to the life of a product manager as well. And in the 3 circles, there are things that I can control, there are things that I can influence, and then there are things that concern me, but I can't do anything about them. So let's take the Playing to Win choices and look at what we can control. The first 3 parts roughly fit into the small circle of control. They're still regularly challenged, but let's be generous and put them in there for now. But the final 2, so internal capabilities and management systems, are never in our circle of control. So what can we do? Well, the first, and I think this is probably the most important point from a sanity perspective, is if we can't control or influence something, we have just got to learn to accept it. Now, that's easier said than done, because it's really tempting then to rail against the establishment, against the leadership team, and become ever more frustrated, vocal. But this is not going to have good consequences on your career. So sometimes it's best just to accept. But we can choose to go for promotion. So we can, as we become more senior in an organisation, we can try and bring more into our circle of control and into our circle of influence. But that option isn't available or attractive to that many people. So a more tangible option is to write a really strong product strategy using a recognised framework like Playing to Win, and surface the need for these enhanced core capabilities and strong management systems to support the products. And to do this, you'll need strong senior stakeholder support. And that brings us very nicely onto our next section. Stakeholder management. Right, I quite like this saying because you can adapt it to loads of other situations. And the saying is, if you can't align stakeholders around your strategy, you don't have a strategy, you have a document. And we already know the starting point for good stakeholder alignment is a set of shared goals. Goal is a target, it shows intent, and it gives us a direction of travel. So for example, grow the product by 30%. And it answers the question, what are we trying to do? Pretty basic stuff, you know all this. But for more effective stakeholder alignment, we can agree outcomes. And an outcome is a result, and it shows the impact. It might say this is our desired impact, or it might be we have done this already. So for example, we increased customer retention from 60 to 75%. and it answers the question, what changed because of what we did? And for this, I'm going to split our stakeholders into two groups. The first group is the team around the product. So these are our peers who we work with to deliver the product. And the second group is our senior stakeholders who we need to consult with for decisions about the product. So let's go on to our cross-functional teams first. And let's look at the difference between goals and outcomes when working with our teams. Goals are necessary because they galvanize people into action, but the actions need to be aligned and focused. A simple goal of growing the product by 30% sets off a frenzy of activity, but not all of it is productive or aligned. Everyone runs off to get busy, delivering that growth in their own way. However, if we translate those goals into outcomes, we can break them down into much more tangible statements that support the product strategy. And clear outcomes then generate discussions on how teams can work together to achieve the outcomes, rather than just going off and making busy in our different silos. So looking at the outcomes listed, each outcome moves us towards our growth target, but it means we have to collaborate cross-functionally. We have to discuss, we have to understand, we have to plan, and we have to execute together. And that's a lot more valuable. And this is especially valuable in those areas that are beyond our control, because we can surface the internal capability needs, we can surface the management system needs, and hopefully we can start to demonstrate where the gaps are in internal capabilities and where the gaps are in management systems. And now on to our senior stakeholders and why outcomes are more effective than just goals for this particular audience. The first one is outcomes offer more opportunity for storytelling, which is much more persuasive and engaging than just facts and figures. We can narrate what the outcome will look and feel like to us and to our customers. Outcomes move the conversation away from opinions. Stakeholders will usually argue about what to build, not what needs to change. And outcomes make prioritization arguments much easier because they allow for richer discussion, such as impact assessment. So now, if stakeholders are discussing something, you can say, we're prioritizing the work with the biggest impact. And hopefully, stakeholder tension drops because the decision becomes a lot clearer. Outcomes create shared ownership, so not just product ownership. Because when you just talk about goals or features, then stakeholders think that product owns delivery. When you talk about outcomes, it becomes clearer that the business owns the result, because marketing matters, training matters, support matters, and they all matter just as much as product. And this reduces the question of why hasn't product fixed this yet, and shows that this is much more of a team sport. And outcomes make trade-offs defensible. And we're going to talk about trade-offs in the next slide. Now that our stakeholders have got this renewed importance in our minds in terms of helping us navigate choices 4 and 5 in particular, it's even more important to keep them happy. And trade-offs are a key part of keeping them happy and on board. So in the final section of this webinar, here are some tips on managing trade-offs. Number 1, reiterate the outcome before the discussion starts or at the beginning of the discussion, and that'll keep the conversation focused. So a lot of stakeholder conflict happens because the target isn't clear, and quite often people are talking about cross purposes. So open with, which outcome are we discussing here? And then once that outcome's clear, the trade-offs become easier, because you can ask questions like, well, what do we think will have the greatest impact, and start to focus the audience on the discussion. Number 2, always trade against something, never against someone, to keep egos intact. And stakeholders will start trading against each other, but we can bring that conversation back to something. And they will accept trade-offs more easily if the comparison is option versus option, not person versus person. so that they can concede an argument but still maintain credibility. You can reframe people's opinions into shared trade-offs, such as, if we do A, we'll have to delay B. Or if we do B, we're going to miss outcome C. And that creates more objective discussions between stakeholders. Number 3, put everything on the same scale. Stakeholders have got more to argue about when they can't compare things. So to keep discussions in perspective, you can create a reference matrix of the things that matter most to your product and your outcomes. It might be revenue, it might be cost, it might be risk, it might be customer impact. You choose the areas that matter most and then use that matrix as a basis for discussion. Does it make trade-offs more visible? Yes, it makes them more visible. It certainly helps kind of reduce the emotional side of the argument. I can't promise that it will reduce arguments altogether, but it takes the emotion out of it to a certain extent. Number 4, use not now more than no. We'll say on our training courses, when we're advising product managers, we'll say that actually you should be saying no more than you say yes. Because you need to keep control of what's happening with the product. In reality, a hard no can create unnecessary enemies. So we need to soften that no. And then you can introduce delaying tactics. So you can say after the release, or you can say not this quarter. So you're just pushing the no further down the line as you're gathering evidence and people start to realize the direction of travel. You can introduce if-then statements. So you could say, well, we can do this, but it means delaying the reporting work. Are you comfortable with that? And now the stakeholders own the trade-off. You're not the one saying no. Number 5, document the decision and the reason. This is boring, but this is really important. If you've made an important trade-off, write down what outcome we were aiming for, what we decided, what we didn't do, why we didn't do it. And this reduces the risk of having to revisit that same conversation over and over again. Don't pretend that trade-offs are objective if they're not. They're not all objective. Sometimes it's political, sometimes it's strategic, sometimes it's a leadership preference. And it's okay to say, the leadership team wants to reduce risk this quarter, so we have to do it this way. Or this supports the biggest customer, so our choices are limited and we need to do the right thing by the customer. And that's okay. And then finally, be brave. Because your job is not to make everyone happy. Your job is to make sure that the trade-offs are visible, deliberate, explained, and consistent. And stakeholders will tolerate those tough decisions when they believe that this was a fair call, even if they don't like it. Right, we're at the end. I hope you agree with my conclusion that we're not bad at creating a decent product strategy, but we often fail at the implementation phase because there are so many moving parts and we can't control everything. But there are things we can do to help ourselves. We can create a strong strategy framework that shows product success needs wider organizational contribution. We can plan stakeholder engagements and we can frame our strategy in business and customer outcomes. And we can practice the language of assertive and outcome-based trade-offs. If you'd like to learn more, we've got a library of free resources and tools at Product Focus, and we have a range of training courses and bespoke workshops for all levels of product manager, and we would love to train you and your teams. So get in touch if you're ready for world-class training from exceptional people. Let's have a look at some of the questions. I'm going to hand back over to Eddie now because he's got an eye on these questions and he can read them out to me. Be kind to me, Eddie.
Thank you, Louise. So we'll just give, if you do want to ask any questions, I can see some coming in. You just open the questions panel. Your questions are private between me, Louise, and the person asking questions. You won't see each other's questions, so don't be worried that you're asking something which you think's obvious or plain. Every question's a good question. So let me just have a look here. One point from William earlier, Louise, was that Procter & Gamble I think from what you said, probably heavily invest in supporting strategies with data. For example, I think William mentioned Nielsen IQ, and it sounded like that's what you were saying. There was heavy investment of finding what customers were saying in the market.
Yes, yeah. So very data driven, and very ruthless as well in their use of data in terms of narrowing the market to the appropriate market segment, but then not just the hard data, but also the softer, more consumer insight, like the example of going out to India to actually experience things. So yes, data driven decisions, but also lots of customer contact and lots of more intuitive decisions around that. Did I answer that question properly?
Yes, yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, the point of collecting the customer data, they had essentially the product, the category manager actually traveling off to be with the customers, not relying on even second-hand, market information. You had people feet on the street to actually feel what it's like to be the customer. So excellent.
I like that. You just said secondhand data there, Eddie. And I think that's really important because in a big organization, we've often got maybe product designers who go out and meet with customers. We might have research analysts and teams. The sales team obviously go out and meet customers. There's lots of people in the organization meeting customers, and it's quite tempting, especially with AI now, everything's at our fingertips. It's quite tempting to make some big product decisions on secondhand data. And I'm a big believer in still going out and having that face-to-face contact with customers, watching them do their jobs, maybe even supporting them doing their jobs, working in their environment alongside them, and really feeling their day-to-day pain and experience what it's like to be them. So I don't want the kind of the support structures and access to online research tools to take away from the fact that product managers need to be out there feeling and touching and experiencing customers and products.
No, completely agree there, Louise. I think some of my best thinking and best things that we've done have been as a result of having customer calls where you really understand the pain and the need at a very visceral level, rather than some desk-based research that you read about cohorts of product people. I completely agree. Tom, you're asking about the slides. Yes, you can download those. You just go to the little apps dots at the bottom of Livestorm. You'll find a button somewhere in there for handouts, and you can just click that to download things, the slides and the template. Let's have a little look here. What else have we got? So from Marianne, any tips on prioritizing the important work of strategy? I think Marianne's getting at often strategies works down prioritized from product management because there are other things burning, there are fires to put out. Any thoughts about making space for it, Louise?
Yes, it's got to be top of the list, really. If I ever joined an organization or went to do some consultancy work where I spent my 9 to 5 day or 8 to 6 day firefighting and in meetings, I made a commitment to myself that if I did then any overtime, all of my overtime would be spent doing thinking time and strategy work. So because without it, you'll just carry on firefighting forever. You'll never find time to do it. You have to make time to do it. So if you're disciplined enough, or if you have the luxury of finding time during the day, then it's one of the most important things you can do. If you simply don't find time, then any overtime you do is probably the most valuable thing you can do. Because when people are firefighting all the time, I do say, you've got to be honest with yourself now. If whatever fire you're putting out today, had you actually done a little bit of thinking work, a little bit of strategy work, a little bit of research work, if you'd have done this maybe 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, could you have prevented the fire that you're putting out today? And I think we have to be really important in analysing today's issues and saying, as a product manager, when should I have anticipated that issue and when should I have prevented that issue from happening? And the way to do that is with a really strong product strategy. Because even though there's only 5 questions to answer in this particular framework, think about all the background work that's gone into it. You've had to go out and assess the markets, you've had to size the markets, you've had to define and quantify the problem in those markets, you've had to go out and meet the customers in those markets, you've had to look around, what does that competitive landscape look like, who else is in there, how powerful are your suppliers, how powerful are your customers. All of this strategic thinking and planning and research is all gone in behind the scenes to answer those 5 questions. So I would say that even letting a fire burn today, if you can, is probably worth letting it burn to spend some time thinking about how to prevent fires in the future.
Interesting. Interesting question from Ronnie here. He's just said he's seen the survey results that we've just published. They're available on the website under resources, survey results for 2026. And he's actually wondering, or he or she, I can't tell, is wondering why do so many PMs not understand their role as a leadership role? And so, I mean, I can talk a little bit about this because I've been living and breathing the research and the correlations in the research. And what I can tell you is that if you don't know clearly what your roles and responsibilities are, and you don't have a clear metric, and product management isn't seen as a leadership role in your business, and if you're not actually focusing on strategy as your number 1 or 2 priority, that all correlates with much worse outcomes in your business. And it's very clear. And even if you have AI at your fingertips, you will get much better outcomes if you get the basics in place in your organization. In fact, you will get more than 2.5 times better outcomes if you're using AI, just by having the basic things right in your organization. And these are things that leaders can help to do in clarity of the roles and responsibilities, positioning product management as a leadership activity in a business, and product managers focusing on strategy as their number 1 or 2 priority. I can tell you definitively, in all of the correlations I've looked at, you will get much better results in a product organization. And I think, so Ronnie, to your point, if people don't actually know what's expected of them as a product manager and where they should be focusing, and if they don't know what metrics that they should be aiming for, well, you're going to get variable focus on what you deliver in the organization. So it feels intuitive, lack of clarity of roles and responsibilities, lack of focus on strategy, product management not seen as a leadership role. You are going to experience worse outcomes, and people won't know actually what's important to work on. So very interesting there, Ronnie. Do you see the strategy driving the product or the product shaping the strategy? I'm not sure if you can answer that, Louise. That's from Augustine. I suppose it's...
I think that's a bit of both, isn't it?
Or is it an emergent strategy? I don't know if you can answer that one.
I think initially you would want to start with a light strategic framework. If you're going to be building something new, you need to make sure that you've researched the markets, the competitors, the customers, etc. But once you're in a market, then you've got lots and lots and lots of feedback coming from that market, haven't you? So you've got all your product metrics, but also your customer feedback and all of those other kind of quality measures that we take into play. So I think once your product is in life, then I think you need to take a lot of feedback, live feedback, and that live feedback will then influence your product strategy. And particularly around, let's say you've got a growth strategy. So as part of that growth strategy, you need to know, am I just going to sell more to the same group of people? So I'm going to penetrate existing markets further, or am I going to take my product into new markets? And I think that very much depends on how saturated the market is where you are, what those new market opportunities look like. Can you find product market fit in other areas so that you can take your product into a new market, but with relatively low further investment in the product. So I think once it's in life, it's a two-way street, but strategy should always play a significant part in all of that, particularly in the early days.
Yes, yes. It's a tricky one, isn't it? It depends how much of an opinion you've got already, and how much customer discovery you've already done. I think we've got time just for one more. So from James, where to play, Louise? How do you choose where to play when everything looks like an opportunity?
Well, that's a nice place to be, isn't it, if you've got lots of opportunities? But I think the starting point is probably choosing where not to play. And then, so you've got definitely where not to play, and that narrows the field down quite a lot. And then it's about saying, well, how are we going to win? We've narrowed it down a little bit. And so how are you going to win? Because how you win will have an impact then on where you play. And deciding how you're going to win then will narrow down a few more, saying, well, if this is the way we're going to win, we can take these where to play options out if that's how we want to win. So it's not completely linear. You're not going from one question to the next to the next. Sometimes you're most of the time it's quite circular, because you have to balance that where to play decision with the how to win decision as well. And that might be around customer fit. It might be around competitive advantage. It might be around, who else is out there delivering a similar service. Ability to actually deliver into certain markets. You might in that where to play decision, some areas might be very easy to step into compared with others. So and then that strategic coherence with the rest of the portfolio. So it's having that broader view, and then trading off decisions as you work through the process.
Great. Well, I think we're out of time there, Louise. Fantastic. I've certainly learned some things on that, and I'm sure that everybody's enjoyed it. We're getting some nice responses there. So thank you so much, and fabulous for hosting the webinar today. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. See you again soon. Bye.
Thanks now. Bye-bye.